welcome back to Bite Size Business, the show that makes tech, startup, and business easy to swallow. My name's Jim, this is my co-host Aiden, and we're back, baby. Episode Tres Leches.
That's right. And we got an interesting set of topics today about influencers and other things we were discussing earlier.
When we're talking about entrepreneurs today, entrepreneurs is such a loaded word, I feel like. Everyone and their dog is an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone thinks they're an entrepreneur. And whenever you think about entrepreneurship, I think a lot of times, especially now with the rise of TikTok and social media and other things, personal branding becomes a hot topic of when I'm starting my business. Am I the face of my business? Should I be the face of my business? I don't want to be the face of my business, but I feel like I need to be the face of my business because as an entrepreneur in a startup, you're wearing every other hat, so why not be the face of it? Is that something people should be striving for? That's the topic.
Striving for entrepreneurship.
Well, striving for entrepreneurship and their personal brand and their business brand being...
Sure. Let's break that question down into a couple different segments here, but I guess first and foremost, it's like, should everyone be doing entrepreneurship? And the answer is no.
What?
There's a
Everyone
certain
can dream on a star.
I think when entrepreneurship makes sense is first and foremost when you have a skill that you can leverage and monetize. If you don't have a skill that you can leverage that sets you apart from your peers in industry or in a business, then you probably shouldn't be doing entrepreneurship. Like those skill sets tend to be high value. So the trades is an excellent example there. You've got like programming is a nice multiplier on your time and the way that tech stacks and creates value, or sales is another great example of that. But if you have a skill that is monetizable and leverageable, where you actually excel above your peers, that's when you can take advantage of entrepreneurship and build something. The other scenario for entrepreneurs is people who want to be self-employed. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because most people that are self-employed end up working more than your traditional employee anyway. Like there's that quote, it's talking about like, I'd rather work 80 hours a week to avoid working 60. And unfortunately, that's true in many ways because you're not as efficient as you think you are at the wide breadth of tasks. Instead, you should be focusing on those things that are most important. So I guess like breaking down the question of, is entrepreneurship for everyone? The answer is no. Unless you fall in one of those two camps where you want to be working for yourself because of control or skill set, or you have opportunities that you're able to leverage. So
yeah, it's got to be this perfect axis of you're smart enough, you're skilled enough, and you're dumb enough to be an entrepreneur.
Well, the dumb enough is kind of funny too because there's a comment by Dan Mortell's another guy I listen to, some of his business podcasts and things like that, and he was talking about how being dumb has actually made him more successful in business because his first instinct is not to go do it himself. Why are you being a secretary, or why are you taking customer service calls, or why are you doing any number of things in your business when you should be doing whatever your multiplier?
Which brings up a not necessarily a counterpoint to what you said of, when you're an entrepreneur, you should know your skills and you should focus on your skills because that's what you're good at and not do anything else. One could hear that and be like, oh, if I'm not great at this skill, I can't start my business. There 100% will always be somebody else better at what you do.
Right. Well, and just because you don't have necessarily all the skills that are necessary to be well-rounded, it doesn't mean you can't find other people that complement you. Like,
even though you're not a master of your skill.
Right.
Some say as long as you have execution, you're good at, But you should focus on your strengths. It's like, look,
definitely.
Even though you're not the best customer service guy, if your skill is customer service, stay in your lane and
sure. A lot of people, most people are so concerned about rounding out their weaknesses and flaws that they don't leverage their actual skills. And unfortunately, as a society, we kind of like at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable talking to people and you're not willing to put the effort in overcoming the anxiety and all the different aspects of sales or customer service, it's like if you don't even attempt to correct those issues, are you ever going to get good at it? Probably not. Just because you're not willing to make those sacrifices to be able to overcome or to change habits. And at the end of the day, that's really what's going to hold you back from being successful in sales, for example. But how do you then leverage other skill sets you have? Like people that are the interesting thing is like contractors, right? Contractors typically are horrible. They're either great with people or horrible with people. And the ones that are horrible with people know the trades, but the ones that are great with people, they don't. And very different personality types, very different skill sets. Together, they make a very successful team. But unfortunately, the two don't mix. They're like oil and water because one thinks the other provides no value. Because from their perspective, it's like, oh, he doesn't know how to fix that. Or the other guy's saying, well,
why'd you want to work with that old crusty old guy?
Yeah, because he's been doing it for 50 years and it's so intuitive to him. That's.
But both know their strengths and lean into them, and both get customers. Because some people are like, yeah, the old crusty guy, he knows what he's doing. I'll pay him. Or I don't want to work with mean grandpa over there.
But it's like, I don't know, there's like that Bible verse talks about like 1 and 1 becoming more than 1, 2. Mm-hmm. It's like that same thing when
some of your parts is greater than
and essentially, if you can create that kind of the collaborative team, you start to get those effects across the board. And that's what people are missing. That's why companies form. It's about efficiencies and scale and creating better market share and better opportunities for everyone involved, because you're then able to leverage that efficiency to be able to get more reward.
So if I had to sum that up, I'd say you have to be good as an entrepreneur. So many people get stuck in this jack of all trades thing where they're like, oh, I'm just good at everything. As an entrepreneur, I would counter with saying you have to be good enough at lots of skills in the beginning to get the machine rolling. But then ideally you want to, I guess, focus on your strength that lifts the rest of the boat and delegate off what you're not good at.
Right. I mean, like the foundational element of creating
not even
a
what you're not good at. Delegate off what is done more efficiently by others.
Sure. Yeah. And like the three main components you need for any business, though, you've got sales, marketing, operations, and then your finance. Those are your three components. And the people that are good with numbers aren't necessarily the people good with people. So
and operations and finance are different.
Completely different options. Yeah. Like bank financing, understanding taxes, understanding bookkeeping, like all those aspects. That would kind of be the more of that finance role. That's why you have a CEO, a CTO, and a COO. And
sometimes
or
CMO,
CFO, Chief Marketing. At some point,
whatever combinations of letters you want to make, they're there, baby.
Yeah, like those roles start to form as the company grows. But in the beginning, if you don't have those three components, if you're not able to acquire a customer, facilitate a customer's needs, and then finance the things that are necessary to be able to do those other two functions, then you don't have a business. Like you're not reaching a scale where you can actually be successful.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably why those three letters are the most common, the CEO, CFO, and COO, because I think those are the most important there. Right. CMO. I heard that one the other day, and I was like, they're just putting anything in there. I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, so that sums that up. That starts off our topic. So with that, with an entrepreneur, with these people getting things going, starting a business, it's growing. You see that starting to grow. There's this mindset of, I got to get to a point where I can hire people and I can wash my hands. Entrepreneurs either go one of two ways. Either they're quick to get themselves out of their company, or they never get out of their company.
Well, I guess, another Dan Martell quote here, but it's like his book's called Buy Back Your Time. And really what it's talking about is when you need to hire an employee. When does it make sense to make that transition into becoming a larger company than your solopreneur? And really what it comes down to is if you can free up your time, what are you going to be replacing it with? Are you going to be doing something that's more productive than just spending the time to do that other task? And the other things you have to take into consideration, I call it overhead, but even though you're hiring a person who's going to work 40 hours a week for you, you're probably still spending 4 to 8 hours a week in having meetings with them, doing follow-up, doing trainings, things like that. So you're not getting a one-to-one reduction, but you're getting very close to a one-to-one reduction. So that's why you start to see these layers of hierarchy form, because if you're using 4 to 6 hours or 8 hours a week to manage one employee, okay, you need a manager then once you hit 5, 6, 7 employees. Now you're basically a full-time person that all they're doing is managing other people. So that's where you start to see this formation of a hierarchy, because there's layers that need to be formed to then manage the layer beneath it. And you start to lose efficiency because, you're first of all, you're further away from the problem. If you're no longer seeing the front lines and seeing what's going on, you're not getting customer feedback, you're not understanding customer complaints, and being able to iterate on your product or your service. And that's why large companies kind of fail to innovate in the long run, because they're just too far removed from it. But
so much red tape, so much bureaucracy.
that's really what it comes down to, unfortunately.
Now, one thing I want to hit on while we're talking about this, because this was an interesting problem that I feel like is near and dear to our hearts, my heart, maybe the hearts of some people that are listening to this. If you're a new entrepreneur, or at least an entrepreneur in a business that is starting, and you're hiring maybe for the first time, or you've only hired the first couple, the matter of liking the people you hire. I feel like so many times you hire your first employee and you're like, this guy or gal or person is so dumb. And it's not that they're dumb. It's a trust issue. It's a trust issue. You've been doing this job for so long. You hand it off to someone else, and immediately you're like, they're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. What are they thinking? What are they doing?
If you're going to rephrase that in a different way, essentially your initial hires kind of set the company culture and kind of the attitudes, your core operating procedures. Like that will become the standard going forward for everyone else that's hired, because they're now joining the tribe, and the tribe already has this culture that's been set. So your initial employees are really important for setting that, and they need to align with these values. And when you're a solo founder or a small team founder, you're setting those values. You're setting that culture.
You are the culture.
You are the culture. Yeah. And you're going to attract people that meet the culture that you've created. So even though you think your attitudes and performances or whatever are one way, in reality, they might be very different. And that's the perception that other employees are feeling or other co-founders are feeling, and that's going to become the new culture over time. And it's really hard to shake elements of culture once you reach scale, because like if you didn't set it properly when you had 6 employees, good luck trying to reframe it when you have 50. Now there's even more people that are kind of detractors. I saw a really interesting article this past week. It was talking about how in any given hierarchy structure, there's going to be a certain percentage of people that actively work against the interests of the group. Doesn't matter. Like there's always going to be a certain percentage that are just super negative, bad actors. Yeah. They're actively working to sabotage. Most people are going to be neutral. Very few are your positives. But imagine this as you reach scale. You might be able to control it pretty well when you have a small group. But when you have 100 employees, good luck trying to manage expectations. And you're going to have no influence on the break room conversations and things like that. It's too late. The company culture needs to have been set long ago. Mm-hmm. But I guess the other thing is, how do you avoid hiring too soon? I think this is probably what most entrepreneurs need to hear. But before you go out and hire someone, maybe look at automation tools. Like some of the things that you're doing do this. Don't. There's a lot of time that you can waste doing things like tracking all your time and putting everything into a calendar when it's just you. If you need that for organizational structure, do it if it would help you, but don't waste time doing something that's not necessarily relevant
half
to
your
the
day
results.
Is tracking the other half of your day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, are you really being more efficient than if you're just doing the task? Like, don't
What do you always say?
things.
If it takes as long to write on the calendar as it would take to just do the task,
right?
Just do the task.
Like I'm not sure who talks about this, but it's like if the task takes less than 5 seconds, like why are you just do it? Stop thinking about doing it or putting it off. Just go do it. But automation is where you kind of get those returns, though, because like if you're an early stage founder and you realize you're spending 5 hours a week doing invoicing, maybe it's time to look into some invoice automation software. Like one of the ones I've used in the past is called Wave Accounting. Wave Accounting will send automatic follow-up reminders when an invoice is past due. It will mark it off and it syncs with your bank account. So as soon as the money's been received, you can check it off in the system and say, oh, that transaction has been completed.
Wave, our business email is bite-sized business.
But that's just one example. I mean, other thing, Wave will automate things like your bookkeeping as well. So you're going to be saving a lot of time there. Other things that you might want to look into is automation tools or outsourcing through freelancers or contractors to be able to do things like your marketing. If you don't have enough time to focus on marketing or it's not a skill set, maybe it's time to look at somebody else handling that who has experience in your industry or has a plan to implement for your business. So really take the time to sit down with you and develop that strategy. But I mean, there's probably 100 other ways that you could implement automation depending on your industry, use case, skill set. And if you're able to leverage those, you might be able to delay the need to hire your first employee while at the same time avoiding burnout. Like you don't need to work 80 hours a week, you need to work a good 40. And it's all in the prep work.
Which, I was going to say, that's a good, honest 40 hours a week, I feel like is hard to perform and to admit that it was a good 40 hours. But you're right, 100%. It's prep work if you're smart, if you're clever, if you're staying up to date. I think you can go pretty far. Especially nowadays with AI tools and with the progression of all this stuff. We're throwing back the idea of, is it possible to start an entire business revenuing $1 million with one guy?
I read an article the other day talking about the potential for a solopreneur unicorn or deca unicorn, $10 billion company ran by one person is possible today. AI has kind of changed the game. But not necessarily AI that your business needs. There might be something that's not necessarily in the AI space that would still be relevant to your business. But I don't know. You have to give me an industry for an example. But
I would also argue, lots of people talk about solopreneur. I put a heavy emphasis on when you're starting anything, at least getting a core group of people. Even if they're not employees, even if they're just co-founders, which dealing with co-founders can have their own fun twists and turns and things. But going anything by yourself, being in being on an island in a vacuum with your own opinions, only your own opinions, only your own thoughts, I feel like it is always helpful to any business to at least have someone else you're working with.
If you're a solo founder, it's going to be hard to scale a business. Most venture capital firms, they're not going to even look at a solo founder. They don't consider those to be businesses because they're not scalable. They're too dependent on a single individual for their success. Now, the flip side of that is if you have a founding team where you don't have alignment, you haven't discussed strategy, goals, long-term vision, skill sets, and being able to be very open and honest with each other about expectations and meeting those deadlines.
Open communication, being vulnerable with my co-founders. What are you
not necessarily vulnerable, but just willing to take criticism. Really what that is Mr. Beast talked about this. I don't know if he's still kosher to be able to talk about Mr. Beast, but
let's not, Mr. Beast, he may be controversial, but he got to where he was at, he's got to.
But he talks about his early kind of journey into the content creation space and how you spend hours and hours. There's a concept for ADHD people called body doubling, where if you're just in the presence of somebody else who's also doing work, the fact that you're both working on your own separate projects in silence, but you're working together, you're able to be more efficient. Now, he kind of had the same thing going for years where he'd have other content creators in a Discord call open for 12, 14 hours a day, and they'd just be in that call together, and there'd be spontaneous eruptions of, okay, well, how can we be better at this? How can we optimize thumbnails? How can we optimize engagement? How do we write better scripts? What do we do what's the most engaging titles? Now, if you're with a group, you're able to learn from each other's experiences and leverage that effect. Also, you're able to cut down the time for iterating. And really what that comes down to is if you don't even know what you're doing wrong, how are you supposed to improve on what you're doing wrong? If it takes you 3 months to hear a customer say you're doing this bad, well, how many customers have you lost? How many bids have you lost? How many opportunities are now down the drain because you failed to correct something that pretty inconsequential even sometimes, but you haven't taken any action to correct that. And that's really what a co-founder is able to provide if they're the right person. Now, if they're not willing to take criticism or can't take criticism, you shot yourself in the foot. It's worse than not getting feedback. You're actively being sabotaged. So,
for those of you that have tried to start a business, I know I have. I'm like, man, you want to assume the best out of people, but golly.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even if they're your dearest friends, you have to be honest with yourself and be like, this just isn't the guy or gal or person to start a business with.
Yeah, I mean,
Which, no matter how much you want to will them to be.
and you never go into something saying, well, I hope it's going to go wrong, or there's no way it's going to go wrong. But like what ends up happening is people don't realize the level of stress in business when you fail to plan, or you don't actually have the skill set, or you hit a roadblock. And that stress puts a lot of pressure on you that creates conflict and then leads to kind of a falling out. So if you're not able to have a clear expectation of what things are going to look like in the next, month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and a year is not even a long timeline in business. It's like the company lifespan is like, is Coca-Cola like 127 years or something like that? It's like
Something like that, yeah.
like legacy business. The longest running company in the world is some like Japanese like framing company that makes houses or temples, and they're like 2,000 years old, like multi-generational. Like, so if you're getting into something saying, well, we got a 6-month plan, oh, that's great, but like, okay, what does the roadmap look
6
a little
months,
bit longer?
that's step one.
Yeah, it's-
like, what do you...
You haven't even started really at that point.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, when they start forming these groups, they don't they form the role to the person, not the person to the role. Or they they
Right.
have this buddy and they think up this, well, he can do this, or I see this a lot with family run businesses. They'll make a job, they'll create a job for this family member who really had no business being in it, but it just kind of brings the whole...
Yeah, it's
whole
hard
morale
because
down.
at the same time, it's like you think that going into business with family is always dangerous because
Always dangerous.
it's hard to have those honest conversations. But then the flip side of that is like going to business with friends. It's like even worse sometimes. But it's funny. Like, how many years have we been talking about this podcast now? We're at like with 3 years of planning for this.
Exactly. We're at a business timeline. How 3 years? That's we're good.
The number of times that we've set up the microphones and we're like, oh yeah, we got a space. We're ready to record.
Where we thought about setting up the mic. We had
Yeah.
a diagram shown of all the microphones.
We used to call them whiteboard sessions where we'd sit down and be like, oh, here's our roadmap for this great business idea. But
Whiteboards are literally my cocaine.
like, I guess that is, if an idea can survive long enough to become plausible or become like, sometimes it just kind of falls into place where it makes sense to do something because you're finally at the same level, or you're at this place in life, or your experiences were able to then overcome what's obstacles in the past, and that's really what it comes down to. It's like, have you been able to like endure long enough to kind of withstand the test of time before you get into it? Like, know the people you're getting into it with, like.
What's the saying? It's like they've worked 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yep.
Yeah.
And 10 long grinding years, and
Filled with
Yep.
lots of failures and lots of...
what was interesting about that is it's the first 9 years of that might just be creating a little bit of financial stability and a financial base to be able to leap off of, or maybe they finally make the decision to hire somebody to do some coaching or give an honest look inside their business and where they can improve, and they have a massive return on investment from that because all of a sudden they've shortened their iteration timeline from being a year between incremental improvements to being 6 weeks or whatever it is. Like, now they're seeing those dividends. But really, that's what it comes down to. Like, that 10-year overnight success is a real thing. But if you've just been a little bit smarter about how you dealt with those problems, or the way you planned, or reaching out to experts who have already been through that. That's why all the best entrepreneurs are readers, because like your Fortune 500 CEOs, they read. All of them read. They all go to retreats together, or they go to workshops, and everyone's saying, oh, I don't get any value from there. But that's not necessarily true. A lot of these people are in masterminds or workshops and things like that to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and learn from each other's mistakes.
Well, that's why I think there's so many guru courses. Because legitimately, there are guru courses that are worth the $5,000 that you go to that changes your life, and that's what shoots you
Right.
off. But because what is it? There's all good things have imitations or something like that. Because that training is so valuable, there's a bajillion knockoffs of pay $500 and.
And the other thing with it, though, too, is like if it costs $5,000, there's very few people who can afford it. Like, they have to be at a certain level to be able to even get in the room, and that qualifying kind of screening creates a circumstance where there can actually be those power conversations because you've limited all the people who are takers, and now the people that are able to get in that room are the people that are at least reciprocal or givers. And
wow, that's so elitist. How dare you?
at the end of the day, it's like the karmic effect where what you push out into the universe becomes what you get back, right? But at the end of the day, it really comes down to company culture and attitudes, what we were talking about earlier. And you set that as a leader. You set that in all your networking and all the learning you're doing. Like what you experience becomes your kind of what's the word here? Your perspective on the world.
Yeah, no, Alex Hormozy, if you don't know Alex Hormozy, he's the School Games guy. He's the acquisition.com guy. He wrote $100 million offers and $100 million leads. He swears by training, paying for training, going to trainings, having mentors. He runs trainings, but he talks about in his early career how he would spend his life savings. He'd save up, $5,000, spend it all on this workshop.
Yep.
And that's what
and
launched him.
I mean, you might get nothing out of that initial workshop. You might be like, oh, I should pay thousands of dollars. But it's like the number of Facebook groups I'm in right now where there's a lot of value being created, but it costs me thousands of dollars to get in there. I've bought courses for marketing firms, bought courses for raising capital, bought courses for real estate, bought courses for marketing and business formation, and like all these different groups that I'm a part of. And I've really spent tens of thousands of dollars on courses and marketing and memberships. And have I gotten all that value back? Well, I mean, yes and no. It's kind of shaped my perspective. It's exposed me to a lot of ideas. It's like they've taken all this time to build this training course, and they've distilled it all down into this packageable format that I can, very quickly ingest. But at the same time, it's like, did I take a full advantage of those workshops to be able to do networking and interact with other people? And that's kind of where the value creation is created on the back end. Like the educational content, you might be able to get it other ways, maybe even for free, but what's your time worth? And if you haven't got to a point where your time is actually worth something, maybe it's time to have a different perspective on where you're supposed to be utilizing the time you have. Because like if you're still an $8 an hour guy, how do you become somebody who's worth $50 an hour or $100 an hour, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and not to diss free material. Free material is not bad. You can get a lot out of free material. Like I said, I stand by my quote of if you spend enough time on YouTube, you become a master of literally any subject. But I think there's a psychological shift when you pay for a course.
Definitely.
That you're like, oh, my skin is in the game. I'm 10,000 in. I will get 10,000 plus dollars of value out of this course.
Well, it's interesting because your expectations change. Like just because you paid for something. Like if you're seeing something for free, oftentimes customers don't appreciate that at all. Like that because there's no value. There's no value that they had to give up. There's nothing that's really what it comes down to. Did they give up something with the expectation of receiving something back? And without that, there's no value exchange.
Well, an example I like to use is when doctors go down to Africa or any third world destitute place and they give out free eyeglasses. They notice that when they gave out free glasses, the people lost them, they broke them, they kept coming back for more glasses because they weren't doing it, But when they charged $1 for their glasses, which $1 is $1, but in these third world countries, $1's a good chunk of change.
Might be like half a day's wages.
Yeah, exactly. Then all of a sudden these glasses were precious and everyone was treasuring them and keeping them safe and using them. Which, I mean, when you think about it objectively, you're like, they're glasses. Why would you not take care of your glasses? Like, even if you got them for free or $1, they're still doing life-changing services. But once again, it's just that psychological effect on the consumer.
And I guess that really what it comes down to. Like, what are you willing to give up to be able to receive what you want? I mean, what are you able to what can you trade for that? And what are you putting on that kind of sacrificial altar to be able to, receive that? So, that's what a lot of people don't understand about the overnight 10-year success.
It's starting a business is so hard. It's hard. It's worth it. It's terrible. It's wonderful. It's awful. It's great.
For most people.
For most people.
Most people that are willing to make the sacrifices. You got to keep qualifying the statement as you
the qualifying. Yeah, exactly. So I guess for any of you out there listening to this, it's horrible, but we're all in this together. It's horrible and it's great. Ugh. Love it.
One other topic, bringing it back to like, do you need to create a social presence? For
The beginning of this talk.
Like, the answer is it depends on your business. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage social media, and just really what it comes down to is attention to be able to create value for your business or value for others. But you got to be, what is it called? I'm blanking on the word, but intentional about how you do it. Because if you're just plastering content out on social media, there's not going to be any effect. It's going to be too diluted in the algorithm, where the algorithm's not going to put any value on it because nobody's interacting with it, nobody's engaging with it. There's not that value exchange at all. Even if it's not monetary, it's like they're still trading their time. So there's got to be that exchange. But at the end of the day, if you're able to identify key areas of your business where you're able to leverage that attention into some value, that's where you start to see some rewards for your social media, kind of foray. And
which, in this growing age of attention and the attention economy, as people have called it, I think if you think hard enough about your business, 85% of businesses can find a way to make attention be beneficial to them. I mean, because what's Tesla? Tesla's a manufacturing company.
Right.
But why is Elon Musk such a big superstar? Why is he?
I guess.
Why is he such a big personality?
Talk about that difference between like marketing, sales, marketing, and branding. It's kind of this continuum, right? Sales is very individualistic. Like you're reaching out to a specific individual and crafting a sales plan for them. Like it's one-on-one, it's relationship based. That's sales. Marketing is kind of more mass market, where you're starting to have, okay, well, what does this consumer avatar look like? What does this region or this segment of the population, what are they needing? Now you're kind of selling, but on a distributed basis. That's your marketing. Branding is one step further. That's where, okay, well, I'm just pushing it out to everyone. Now we're going to become synonymous with these attributes, these traits, or this solution to this problem. That's kind of where you get like full on global coverage for branding. And for your business, branding's probably irrelevant. If you're doing less than $500,000 a year, your brand's probably less important than your reputation. Like what it's going to come down to is like keeping a good reputation, being honest, having integrity, and then leveraging.
What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, what a crazy concept, right? But I mean, a couple bad reviews can kill a small business. But 50,000 people trying to cancel a major brand might not do anything because they're just at different points. They're not vulnerable to those kind of attacks because they're so entrenched. Their brand has become synonymous with these other values, and a few detractors aren't able to topple that. So, like, what's relevant for your business? Maybe it's just that sales and marketing level. For most companies, probably not going to be that branding, but it's like, how do you defend your reputation? Because that's going to play into each of these.
I like that. Other questions I had for this, we're going to go into influencer marketing, things like that, but I'm like, Honestly, at the end of the day, influencer marketing kind of is its own topic to discuss. There's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of branches we can talk about on this. If you have any questions or comments about the show or influencer marketing or anything we've talked about today, check down in the comments for the link. Our email address is down there. We do answer every single email you send to us. Hard to believe, but we actually like hearing from our viewers. It's crazy, I know. And if you ever want to get an email from one of us, you can do that. Like I said, down below in the comments.
See you around for next time.